But Jesus saw the temple. Paul sees the temple in 2 Thessalonians 2. He talks about the Antichrist being in the temple and deceiving the world. And now John is seeing the same thing in chapter 11 of Revelation. So basically, look what it says in verse 2. After he measures this temple, but leave out the court, which is outside the temple, Revelation 11:2. Don't measure it. It's been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the holy city, that's Jerusalem, underfoot for 42 months. Now, yesterday in the Q&A, or the after-class talk, someone came to me, one of their questions was, great, and they said, how come Dan isn't in, the listing in Revelation of the 144,000? I said, oh, that's great. Good question. The tribes of Israel is like an alphabet made up of 14 letters. There are the 12 sons of Jacob, which are the normal 12 tribes of Israel, but do you remember God split Joseph, or actually didn't split, doubled his portion because Joseph was so faithful, and he took away the tribe of Joseph, and the Levites didn't get a tribal allotment, so he pulled that back, and he put in 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, and they were big tribes. And so what we have is the 12 plus Manasseh and Ephraim. So we have 12 tribes plus 2 more that God added. That's 14. And so what's fascinating is that when the Lord starts talking about this, he said that he is limiting Antichrist time to 42 months. It's just like the 12 tribe alphabet that has 14 letters in it, and there's 12 tribes, but there's 14 tribes. The tribulation has many names too. The tribulation is called the 70th week in Daniel. It's called the time of 42 months and 42 months. It's called the time of 3.5 years and 3.5 years. It's called the time of 1,260 days and 1,260 days. You say, what is that? It's the vocabulary God uses to describe the career of the Antichrist. And right here it says that the Antichrist only rules, see verse 42, he allows them to trample underfoot for 42 months. That's what God calls what Satan is doing through the Antichrist, trampling this temple. And I will give power to my 2 witnesses. So God, while he's limiting the career of Antichrist to just half the tribulation, personally what I think is the first half is building up, and it's kind of like all those environmental problems are coming, and this genius arises, and he's the Antichrist. And he's really smart, and he's really a communicator. And, I mean, Daniel tells us a lot about him. You know what Daniel says? He has the God of forces. So he has this kind of supernatural power. And it also says he's a man who has no desire for women. What do we call that today? They call that gay. They call that homosexual. And so this man is a Roman leader who has supernatural power of forces, who, we'll see in just a minute, is one of the greatest communicators ever to come to the earth. I mean, when he speaks, people are wanting to follow him. And God limits how long he's doing because Satan's empowering him. And look what the Lord always does. He frustrates Satan's plan. The Lord deploys 2 witnesses. And it says, I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days. Now look, verse 2, 42 months. Verse 3, 1,260 days. Half what it's saying of the 7-year tribulation. So, and then there's a messianic revival. Verse 4 talks about that. And they're the 2 olive trees, the lampstands, according to the God of the earth. These 2 witnesses are stirring up the Jews and getting them who are protected by God. And so all this is going to come together. Let me just kind of put it in a chart for you. The 2 witnesses, it talks about the duration of their time is 42 months. They're empowered for 1,260 days, which is the same thing. They're able to call down fire and shut heaven, just like Elijah did. They turn water into blood and smite the earth with plagues, just like Moses did. So historically, God doesn't tell us who they are. But by the way, Elijah was taken to heaven without dying. Moses died but was buried by God. And there's a 3rd person in the mix that was also taken to heaven before Elijah without dying. And so we actually have 3 contenders for the 2 spots of the 2 witnesses. what they do is like Moses and Elijah. But the fact that Jesus said everyone has to die once, except for those taken in the rapture, everybody else has to die once. Since Elijah didn't and Enoch didn't, many people think that it's Enoch and Elijah. Other people think it's Moses and Elijah. And I think, I don't know, because it doesn't say. But then the beast from the abyss, this is the Greek word, abuso, kills them. And earth dwellers celebrate, and they're resurrected after 3.5 days. So that's everything we know about the witnesses. They serve God for half the tribulation. Humanity, see in verse 7, when they finish their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit will make war against them and overcome them and kill them. So see, they're fire-breathing, God-protected, rain-stopping, plague-smiting until their ministry is done. Did you catch that? Did you know we're invulnerable until God finishes what he's doing with us? It's amazing. I mean, if you ever read great missionary stories like John Paton of Vanuatu, that missionary, they dropped him off of a boat in the 1800s to go to this island in Micronesia to give the gospel. They wouldn't get near the island. They were headhunters. And they had killed too many sailors. And so they just put him in a boat and his wife and pushed him and said, have fun, you won't make it. You ever read his biography? He pulled up with his boat on the shore, and the Indians all stood in amazement. The cannibals all stood in amazement, and they didn't bother him. And then they came and bothered him a little bit, and then his wife died, so he buried her, and he slept on her grave, and they didn't bother him when they should have killed and eaten him, which is what they did to every other white person. After a few years, when he led them to Christ, you know what they told him? They said, where are all the big soldiers you had with you? When you got off that boat, we stood back. We saw the big soldiers with you. Of course, they saw angels, which John Paton didn't see. See, God is able to keep us supernaturally. Where does it say that? Hebrews 1:14. Are they not all ministering spirits sent forth to minister for those who shall be heirs of salvation? That's a description of angels. We have what commonly is called guardian angels, but the Bible doesn't call them that. It just says they're watching over us because we are heirs of salvation, and nothing can happen to us until we finish our purpose in our generation, our course that the Lord's given us. So they get in chapter 7, the Antichrist defeats these nuisance two witnesses, kills them, but look what happens. God uses even their death as a very powerful event. And it says, and I've already read this to you on our first class, but I'll tell you again. After 3.5 days, verse 11, the breath of God enters them. They stood on their feet. I can just imagine someone's got their phone out and they're doing Facebook Live or whatever is current then. There's probably a line like they have at big funerals, and there they are just laying on the ground, massacred by the beast, and they're going by filming it and talking, they have their own little live show or something. And all of a sudden, whoop, they stand up, and that person drops their phone, and someone else picks up the live stream. And it says, the breath of God comes in them, they stand on their feet, and great fear falls on those who saw them. And then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying, come up here. That's the same thing we hear in chapter 4. Come up here. The door is open in heaven. Come up here. This is a sound of when God takes people to heaven. That's why we believe the church goes to heaven in chapter 4, but we already covered that. But come up here. And they ascended to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies saw them. And in the same hour, there's this earthquake. So the end times, did you catch? The whole world is watching. In fact, before this, starting in verse 8, it says, they watch them dead for 3.5 days, and they send gifts to each other. That means Amazon or somebody is still in place. I just read the Mac magazine that had this cute little thing I want to buy for my computer that you can use your iPhone as the camera, and it hooks in wirelessly. And so I ordered it on Amazon. It's coming from England, but it's on Prime, so it's free. And I thought, what a world we live in. You can, in Florida, order something from England and have it freely delivered to your house, and they even track it for you and show you where it is in transit. We don't think anything about that. When this was written, news traveled at the speed of horse. As fast as a horse could gallop is how fast the news went. Emperors would die in office in Rome, and it would take months for the couriers to get the word to the furthest Roman legionnaire outposts. News traveled by the speed of wind and the speed of horse and chariot and foot. So when this was written, those who didn't believe the Bible for 2,000 years would say, that's obviously an error. How can the whole world see anything? It takes, even in World War II, it took months for the word to get out that Japan was defeated. Because after World War II, because there were so many remote places and they didn't have satellites, they didn't have television. But in the tribulation, there's global television. People see these two witnesses laying there, and global communication as the whole world is watching and communicating and sending gifts to each other.